Engines!
Pick the pace car! What for? Because you hit every other damn thing out there, I want you to be perfect.
When I'm driving, I got a guy on the radio who talks to me. It's him. He talks to me.
Well, I wanna be a race car driver. Pretty girls eating from my hand, yeah. Wanna live a life of fun and danger. No sweater working for the man, alright. Well, hey. Well, I wanna be a firefighter. Cool-headed when the heat is on, yeah. Save my baby from the burning building. Take all the work sleepless on, alright. Well, alright.
No, he didn't slam you, he didn't bump you, he didn't nudge you, he rubbed you. And rubbing, son, is racing.
Hey, race fans, welcome to the Hoobazoo Radio Network, and welcome to the Drafting the Circuits radio program. My name is Frank Santoroski. I'll be your host for the next hour as we run down everything racing. And my gosh, we have quite a show for you tonight. There are so many stories going on. Before we get into the long list of headlines, let me introduce you to the panel tonight. With me, as always, Mr. Gray Warren from Richard Childress Racing, the editor-in-chief of Motorsports Tribune and writer for IndyCar.com, Joey Barnes. I have with me Seth Eggert, our NASCAR correspondent, who also works at Motorsports Tribune, and our Formula One analyst, Richard Youden. Last but not least, how's everybody doing tonight?
Good, thank you.
Doing good.
Great.
All right. Great to talk to you guys. It always is. So we had a big weekend of racing. All three major series were in action. The IndyCars were at Portland. Formula One was at Monza. And the Southern 500 down at Darlington, where Gray was there in attendance covering the race for us, happened as well. The winners this weekend were Takuma Sato at Portland. Lewis Hamilton took the win at Monza. And Brad Keselowski, who hadn't had a win in the regular season this year, sweeps Darlington by winning both the Xfinity and the Cup races. But outside of the races, there is just so much going on. Just look at the list of headlines here. In IndyCar, the Mazda Road to Indy crowned their champions. Indy Lights champion Pato O'Ward. Rhinus VK takes the Pro Mazda trophy as Kyle Kirkwood wins in USF 2000. We have Robert Wickens from his hospital bed clinching the Rookie of the Year for the IndyCar Series. Colton Herta and Pato O'Ward, coming out of the Indy Lights Series, will make their IndyCar debut at Sonoma, running for Harding Racing. The IndyCar schedule was released. So was the first draft of the Formula One schedule. Both of those schedules have Eddie Gossage panties in a wad because he's beginning to realize that the motorsports world does not revolve around the Texas Motor Speedway. And Fernando Alonso was testing an IndyCar on a road course for the first time at Barber. In the meantime, we've got the on and off saga of Kimi Räikkönen and his future with Ferrari, but quite possibly the biggest news of the week, Furniture Row Racing, the 2017 Monster Energy Cup titleists, closing their doors after this year. Martin Truex Jr., Cole Pern, looking for work next year. Looks like they probably found some. So, Gray, you're well versed in NASCAR. We've talked about this extensively last week. So, what's the feel in the NASCAR garages here with this announcement on Furniture Row?
Well, it's a shame, and a lot of people are looking at it as a bad sign for NASCAR, and it's no secret that NASCAR is struggling right now with sponsorship and TV ratings and fan attendance and things like that. But I think there's a little more to the story than just the 78 couldn't replace 5-hour energy. It's a little bit deeper than that, and from what we've been hearing, yeah, they were shopping around for another sponsor, but I don't think the part of it is that they really couldn't get a sponsor. I think there were some family pressures being brought to bear by Barney's family, Barney Visser. We're talking about the owner of the 78. I think that they just felt that at this time they had accomplished a lot of the goals that they'd set out. I think they'd also spent a lot more money. Their family business spent a lot more money than they had attended to in the beginning, and I think that they looked at the landscape and saw that this was a good time to exit the sport. I do feel that they probably could have replaced 5 Hour Energy with if not one, multiple sponsors to get it going. But there again, we've talked about it all along. We're in somewhat of an adjustment now in the sport. The rates for sponsorship and things are down. Salaries are going to be big name salaries for drivers and crew chiefs are also going to undergo an adjustment with sponsors packages being readjusted as they come up for renewal. So I don't look at it as totally where they could not find a sponsor. I just think that, had they wanted to go forward, I believe they could have, and I believe they could have found the funding to go forward. I think that, like I just said, it was a time when the family got together and decided that this was the time to do it.
Now, the fact that their team is based in Colorado rather than in the Charlotte area, or in the there's a couple of Virginia-based teams, but the bulk of the teams are in that Charlotte area. Might this have been an easier prospect to just kind of sell out the team had they been based in Charlotte? And is it just because of their proximity to the rest of the sport that it's just easier for them to shut the doors and then maybe auction off the equipment?
Barney had to be, and I said this earlier in the week, Barney had to be a little bit of a maverick anyway to do what he did, to go and say, okay, I'm gonna field a Cup team, and I'm gonna do it my way, and I'm gonna field it in Denver, Colorado, miles and miles away from the hub of the sport. A lot of people come into our sport, a lot of co-owners come in, and first thing they do is set up shop in North Carolina. Barney did it his way. And I think this is, another way of him, he came in, did what he wanted to do, and this is his way of going out.
And to that point, in 2013, when Kurt Busch was driving for the team, Kurt had openly stated that Barney had refused to take on sponsors because he wanted Furniture Row on the car, his company, when the car went to Victory Lane.
Yeah. Hindsight
being 2020, could that have made a difference today? Who knows? But
like I said, he did it his way.
But another factor that Barney Visser cited in the closure of the team at the end of the year is the increasing costs of the alliance with Joe Gibbs Racing.
It's almost convenient, isn't it, really?
Yeah. And like I said, I do believe with, and it's not a big secret that Barney's had some health issues at the end of last season, and I think it's a lot of family pressure on it. That is a family-owned business, family-run business, and I think that had a lot to do with the decision, and they just got together and decided this was going to be the best way forward. Get out while the getting's good, and then too, you talk about it costs more to do business away from the hub of stock car racing. When you're in Denver, Colorado, you think about all the stuff with their alliance with Joe Gibbs. All that stuff has to be transported halfway across the country, back and forth. Then you've got when the cars have to go to when the chassis. Of course, Joe Gibbs takes care of a lot of that stuff, but the stuff has to be taken to NASCAR and then carried back and forth, and just parts and stuff that go back and forth. I mean, I know the UPS truck stops at Joe Gibbs and stops at Furniture Row Racing every day, but just the logistics of it are costly, running a team outside the Carolinas. And that on top of everything else, I think too that, like Seth alluded to, the additional costs, I think there was a little bit of a disillusionment there. And they just decided that this was the time to do it. And, essentially, he's going out on top. Basically, they still got a shot at winning a championship. They're one of the top 3 teams in the sport. So, it's not like, a lot of teams that fold in NASCAR will have a ride the wave to the top, and then they'll ride the wave back down to the bottom. Well, that's not the case for Furniture Row. They're gonna end it, up on top of the sport. So it's the way to go out.
And it reminds me of another team that did that as well. Raymond Beadle in the 1980s. He went out, won the championship with Rusty Wallace in '89, and the next season they finished 6th in points, and then he shut the team down.
Yeah. So that, that's been a good many years ago, but yeah, it's similar. But like I said, I just don't think, people are reading a lot into this, and we all know NASCAR's trials and tribulations right now, but I don't think this is quite the story that people want to make it out to be, that because they couldn't find a sponsor that they're totally going at. I don't believe that is the case. Things are tough right now, but I think it's just a decision on the Visser family that it's time to move on.
Now, Joey, you've got a question about this?
Yeah, I had a couple of things that were on my mind about it. I guess the first thing that comes to mind is just hearing that Martin Truex Jr. is going to end up over at Joe Gibbs most likely and take over the seat. And more or less now Daniel Suarez is the guy that's looking for a ride, which, it's a bummer for him because we've started to see that progression. Gone are the days in NASCAR when a rookie can come in and do what a Tony Stewart or a Casey Kane did. These guys have to, especially with this type of car that we have nowadays, they have to progressively move along. And so this more or less stunts his growth. We saw Chase Elliott, who's supposed to be the favorite son. He didn't get a win until his 99th start. So I think that to hinder somebody like that, a Drive for Diversity driver also, no less, certainly hinders that. And, I feel for him, and hopefully he can find something that's a very good opportunity. It gives him a chance to continue to grow the way that he already has been growing. But I think to shift it a different way, it wasn't that long ago when we were looking at a five-car Roush team, and we were like, how much bigger can this get? And Roush could have probably fielded 8 full-time entries with the amount of sponsorship money that was flowing into that place. But NASCAR put that hammer down and said, yeah, no, we're going to limit this thing, and you can only have so many cars. And then we started to see a few alliances tweaked and pulled here and there over the years. But I guess where I'm going with it is, I don't even know if NASCAR lifted that mandate where they would say that you can have however many damn cars you wanted out there on the field, and Hendrick could run an 8-car team and what have you to help fill the car counts, because now we see a good team and a good car count drop once again. If we even have the money available within the sport to put that many cars back out there, I think that we're, the situation with Barney Visser being a little unique and a little different on why they shut the doors, I think no matter what, the outcome is the same, and that we're looking at an even lower car count in NASCAR, and it's somebody that's certainly hurting the sport with losing a guy like Barney Visser, who's done a lot in a short amount of time.
I think the answer to what's going to happen to Suarez is Toyota's pulling the strings on a lot of this behind the scenes. Now that they have decided that, of course, it hadn't been announced officially, but it's almost a foregone conclusion that Truex and Cole Pern are going to end up at Joe Gibbs Racing in the 19. I think that they will absorb the 95 car as a full-blown alliance team, like they did when they created that 77 car out at Furniture Row to kind of just house or kind of get some seasoning for Eric Jones' 4th season. It'll appear on the surface as a demotion for Suarez, but he will be Toyota supported if that 95 thing goes through, and I'm sure he'll have adequate sponsorship to run in that 95. He just won't be in a quote in-house car in that case. So that's kind of looking at how the dominoes are going to fall on that situation, and Seth can probably allude a little bit more to that on what he's heard.
Well, the rumor is that the 95 is going to be a Toyota team next year. Whether or not the Levines actually try to put some sort of clause so that way the alliance doesn't keep upticking in price, that there's a question about that now. But the other major thing that we haven't touched on, and not many have, is the charter that the 78 has. The money, the prize money, is paid out based on the last 3 years of performance. Other than the 78, I don't know what other team has had the kind of performance that they have had, being fifth in points in 2016, winning the championship last year, and likely being in the Final Four this year. That's going to be it's going to be worth at least not more. We just had a charter from BK Racing, a backmarker team that was really making it, sell for $2 million at auction. So that is going to be a pricey commodity for whether it's GMS Racing or another team. But as far as Suarez is concerned, from what I've heard, Aris, the sponsor, is contractually tied with Gibbs. They would not be able to move with Suarez, as previously thought.
Now, those contracts can be renegotiated to some degree. So, there's a lot more has to be worked out. But Joe Gibbs always been a gambler. He'll go out and he'll sign the top talent, and then he'll turn around to his marketing department and say, "Look, I've brought in the talent. Now it's up to you guys to find money." And that's kind of how that deal has gone over there for several years. So we'll see what happens. But obviously, they have put together a super team. When you see when we go to Daytona in 2019, with they're going to have a stacked deck when they show up with Hamlin, Truex, Kyle Busch, and Eric Jones. So that's going to be a formidable outfit next year. So we'll see how that goes, and then we're still waiting to see what's going to happen with the Stewart-Haas program. Will Kurt Busch return to the 41, or will someone else replace and join Harvick and Amarola and Boyer?
And just to add one more layer to that, Toyota has also said that with the new Toyota Supra in the Xfinity Series that's going to debut next year, they want more than just Joe Gibbs Racing as a factory-supported team, and they have said that they'll likely have another team. So not only are they going to be expanding in the Cup Series, but they'll probably be expanding in the Xfinity Series as well.
Yeah, so that leaves the door open for another team to switch. I'm sure Toyota's money would make that a very enticing proposition for some teams, and I'm sure they'll go after teams that have the wherewithal already, the resources that they could bring to bear. And when I'm thinking out GMS for one thing, they have and been building their resources over a number of years. So that might be an attractive thing. And then, like I said, that's just speculation on my part. But looking at teams that would be attractive to Toyota, possibly.
And GMS has or was in talks with Barney Visser about possibly merging or buying the charter from him, and apparently talks either broke down, or it was either the lack of sponsorship or even the increased cost of the alliance with Gibbs.
Yeah, and I think too, Toyota can do a lot of things, and they're powerful. They could offset the cost of that alliance if they wanted to. So that's part of the equation too.
All right,
Gibbs have done pretty well out of it, though, haven't they? Really?
Oh yeah.
I'm sure there's been a little bit of, if we increase the cost of this alliance, we could get the guy that we really want here.
Well, and I had these discussions, with a guy that worked over at Joe Gibbs after the '78 team left the Chevrolet fold, and their alliance with Richard Childerson moved over to Toyota and went into the alliance with Joe Gibbs. I forget where we were. I was out in a social event, and one of my buddies that works over at Joe Gibbs was talking about, how much it was going to increase their work and this, that, and the other. And I told him, I said, look, man, I said, I'm going to tell you something about that thing. You will be surprised how much you will benefit. And I mean, Joe Gibbs Racing will benefit from your alliance with the 78. It'll be a two-way street, and you guys will benefit as much from them as they will benefit from you. And I think that pretty much came to fruition, because I know that was the case at RCR, and Richard will probably back me up on that. The 78 guys, they're a smart bunch of guys over there, and I think we had a good two-way flow of information and things that helped both teams when they were with RCR as well. Wouldn't you agree, Richard?
Oh yeah, I mean, those guys, they're in quite a unique situation. They had the budget of a full cup team in many, many ways, without the need to generate, build their own chassis and do all that sort of stuff. So they'd take the basic RCR structure and they'd ship it over to Denver, they'd fluff and buff it, and then go out and beat us every week, which got a bit demoralising. But
yeah.
they had the finances to be able to do that. And, it was
technically they shared with us too. Yeah, I mean, and I think Joe Gibbs benefited from their relationship with the 78, because it upped Toyota's performance across the board.
Yeah, like any good alliance does, and that's one of the reasons you do it. You get, you get paid for producing these parts, and naturally you will make a profit on that. And secondly, you get, information coming back the other way.
Yeah, well, guys, we've spent a lot of time talking about this, but there is so much to cover tonight. We just got 1 hour, so but let's move on a little bit, because NASCAR did have a pretty good race down there in Darlington. We had the throwback schemes. We saw Kyle Larson looked like he had the best of the field until that last round of pit stops where he got. Brad beat him out, and it ended up being a Penske 1-2. Now, Gray, you spent your weekend down in Darlington, so let's get a few highlights from the race before we move on.
Yeah, it was an opportunistic Brad Keselowski in both races this weekend. He won, but he swept the weekend, winning the Xfinity race on Saturday in somewhat the same fashion that he won Sunday night in. He took advantage of a situation when the leaders crashed or got into one another, and was in the right position, was running close to the front, was able to capitalize on that, and ended up winning the Xfinity race on Saturday, that was his first laps led in competition at Darlington in that race, and then he won. And then the next night he did the same thing. Kyle Larson had led 284 laps and had the car to beat all night long. He was great on the short run, great on the long run, and of course the last pit stop, Keselowski's team rose to the occasion. They beat Larson off pit road by the slimmest of margins. I was sitting right at the end of pit road and watched that race, and it was the width of a bumper, and it allowed Keselowski to be the control car for the last restart. He was able to jump out, get a little bit of a lead, and stretch that lead out over the last 20-some laps, and was able to win the race. And I think just Larson's car went away, and he wasn't able to hold off Logano. Logano got around him, but Larson still got a good third place finish at it, and probably somewhat demoralized by that. But still, it was a good race at Darlington. Typical tire degradation that allowed the field to kind of accordion back and forth. There was one segment during the middle of the race where the 78, the 4, and the 42 really put on some spirited racing there for a while. The three of them exchanging the lead among the three of them for a bit there during the middle of the race was pretty good. But great night of racing, like it always is at Darlington. Darlington never disappoints.
Yeah, Darlington never disappoints. It was a pretty good race. Yeah, I dozed off for a while. I was watching on TV. I won't lie. I worked all day. Was on late. Started an hour late. Woke up and Kyle Larson was still with us. Well, it didn't miss much, but then Brad comes and steals it at the end. So, but now we're up to the Brickyard, and the Brickyard is the last race of the regular season, okay? So Keselowski had already clinched a spot in the playoffs on points. The win for him just validates it. It doesn't change anything one way or the other. But there's one race to go. Whoever wins that can get into the playoffs if they're not already clinched in. Seth, you've done all the number crunching. Who's on the outside? Who's on the inside? Who's feel safe? Who's desperate to get in? And who do you like for regular season champion?
Well, there's only two drivers that are currently in but not locked in, and that is Jimmy Johnson and Alex Bowman. In order for the two of them to make it in, as long as there's a repeat winner, Johnson would have to earn 37 points if it's a new winner. Bowman would have to finish in the top 6 if there's a new winner. And he would have to outpoint Jimmy Johnson by at least 20 points. Otherwise...
And given Jimmy Johnson's performance lately, might not be that tall of an order. Just saying.
Yes, and otherwise, everybody else who's not already locked in, so that's Stenhouse, Newman, Menard, Suarez, McMurray, and a host of others, have to win in order to get in. As far as the regular season championship is concerned, it's down to two drivers, Kyle Busch and Kevin Harvick. Kyle Busch only needs to earn 22 points in order to clinch the regular season championship. He has a 37-point lead right now, so essentially he has to finish in the top 20 to clinch, no matter what Kevin does.
And that regular season championship is worth what to him?
15 bonus points.
Yeah, that's pretty big.
And second would only get 10 bonus points.
Okay.
And is there a cash award with that as well? I know there's a trophy, but is there a nice big paycheck?
I think there is. I want to say it's $100,000, but I don't remember exactly what the amount is.
Half those cup drivers don't get out of bed for $100,000.
So it's probably more than that, but again, I just don't know what it is off the top of my head.
Okay, I didn't know either. That's why I asked you. So we're headed to the Brickyard, and one of the nifty things about the Brickyard this year is they built a dirt track out there in the Snake Pit area of Turn 3. They ran some laps out there. Last week they ran some laps there. Today they got little grandstands there. They're going to open the Turn 3 grandstands to where you get kind of a distant view because they're feeling like the grandstands, the little grandstand around the track is going to fill up. But this has generated a lot of excitement. It's one of the richest dirt races out there with a $70,000 prize for the winner. There are upwards of 100 cars entered for this.
118.
118, and it's going to be the BC 39 race in honor of Brian Clausen, who lost his life a while. Landon Castle is going to be in there. Connor Daly will be the lone Indycar entrant represented in there, but who else is going to be in there? Are we going to see, is Kyle Larson going to hop in there? Or?
Larson was entered. From what I heard, he may have backed out. I don't know. I know Justin Marks was talking about running. Justin Allgaier is going to be running. I think Alex Bowman is going to be running. You have a number of regulars running. Logan Seavey, who just won the ARCA race this past weekend.
How about our friend Jeff Andretti? Not Jeff. Jared Andretti.
I believe he's on the entry list.
Yeah,
and also on the entry list is Carson Earnhardt Elledge, the granddaughter of Dale Earnhardt Sr.
And she's a regular over at Millbridge Speedway. Yes. So yeah, and I was surprised that Christopher Bell was not entered, but there's a lot at stake for these guys right now this time of the year. Christopher Bell is vying for an Xfinity championship. Kyle Larson is vying for a for a Cup championship. So as we get down to the start of the playoffs for both of those divisions, I'm sure that has to factor in, when it comes to their involvement in these extracurricular things. So that probably looks, but it'd be a big show. Indy used to turn this thing out like a Speed Weeks type thing when the Cup cars came there, and there was a lot of stuff. In fact, not to get too far away from it, but I'm hearing that Raceway Park is going to get an influx of some money and is going to upgrade their facility, and quite possibly NASCAR racing could return to IRP at some time in the future. So we'll have to follow that story and see how that goes. But it hopefully they can, with the change in the date for the Brickyard 400, hopefully it won't be so hot up there. And we'll be able to get a good crowd along with the positioning of it on the schedule as a last race before the chase. So it could create a lot of drama up there, and we'll just have to see what happens. The only thing that worries me is they're going up against the opening week of the NFL, and that could be problematic.
Yes, and the Colts have a home game the same day. So and I think they said NASCAR had wanted a Saturday race, or the Speedway had wanted a Saturday race, one or the other. I don't know if it's NASCAR or the Speedway, to not compete with the Colts playing at home, but we'll see. I mean, the Brickyard has been a struggle to get folks in the stands for about the last 5-6 years. I mean, prior to that, it was a very viable event. The first couple of years they had it, they actually outdrew the Indy 500. During the split years, but I applaud them for trying to just throw more gimmicks at it. I don't know if it'll fill the stands, but as long as they make some money, put it on a compelling race, and this will decide who's in the chase.
Yep. I just worried it's going heads up against the NFL, and like you, Frank, the Saturday race to me would have made a great deal of sense. At least that they would only be going up against college football, which is strong enough.
Yeah.
But like you said, we'll just have to see what goes on, and I'm sure they will examine that and adjust for it later.
All right, so let's make some picks for the picks for the Brickyard real quick, because we got so much other news to kind of digest here and talk about. So, Joey, I'll start with you. Who do you like for the Brickyard?
Eric Almirola.
And Richard?
Chase Elliott.
And Gray?
I'm going to say, there's going to be some guys up there trying to pull out all the stops and do it. I tell you, I'm going to say Kyle Larson's going to rebound from a disappointment at Darlington and punch his ticket to the chase with the win up here.
All right, and Seth?
Truex. I mean, after last year, every time he had bad luck, he ended up in victory lane. So what else is new?
What else is new? Yeah. So I'm going to go with Kurt Busch. I mean, why not? I mean, he's already clinched the spot, so nothing exciting about that pick. So, but anyway, so what do you guys want to dig into next? This Portland race or the events at Monza? First guy to speak up gets to talk.
Monza.
Okay, Richard. So, so the Ferraris stumbled at Monza, or were stumbled upon, however you choose to take it. So, but let's give us a quick rundown of Monza, where we saw all the potential in the world of Ferrari end up with Hamilton winning.
Yeah, it goes back to some of the comments we made last week ahead of the race about the fastest car winning the race. It hasn't happened too often in the last few months in Formula One, and again, going to the Monza, you saw exactly the same thing there. The Ferraris dominated practice or the dry practice when they had it, and qualifying, the Ferrari had a front row lockout with Kimi beating Sebastian by a pretty small margin there. A little bit of unhappiness, should we say, in the radio communication from Vettel, saying, implying that he maybe should have had the tow from Kimi. during during that last round of qualifying to try and get ahead of there. But, Ferrari front row lockout at Monza, you can't get much better than that no matter which way around it is. So off the start, you're always going to turn one. You have a little bit of a, drivers with broad shoulders there trying to force the way through that tight first corner. You saw Pierre Gasly didn't even make it to the first corner. He got squeezed out by two cars either side of him and didn't have his front wheels intact by the time he got to turn one. So that slowed him down. But it was up into the turn, I guess it's 4-5, I think, complex there where Hamilton went round the outside of Vettel and basically they just squeezed each other. And I think if you look at it closely, Vettel is on the inside and he goes over the inside of the left-hand turn there into turn 4. He sort of gets a little bit oversteery on entry, and as he hits the curb, the sort of rear of the car steps out, and he pretty much just slides into Hamilton. I don't think it was really Hamilton turning in on him. I think if Vettel had a little bit more control of the car going into the left-hander there, they probably would have just about made it through the corner together. I'd call that a racing incident. There certainly was no malice, I don't think, on Hamilton's part. It was just hard racing. That dropped Vettel back to the tail of the field. Now, Kimi was able to maintain his lead, through that first few corners in the first lap and pull away a decent lead over Hamilton and Bottas there in third. But Mercedes played their hand perfectly. They were in a position where they knew that with two cars up the front, they could cover whatever Ferrari did, and they were pretty much guaranteed to beat them. You saw a little bit of dirty tactics, I think, by Mercedes pulling their guys out into the pits, which basically bluffed Ferrari into pitting. So Kimi pitted relatively early in the window for the soft tyre there, and Hamilton stayed out for another 5 or 6 laps. There was no way that Hamilton could maintain Kimi's pace. What it did mean is that towards the end of the race, Hamilton was going to be on fresher tyres, and with a combination of that and keeping Bottas out there longer, Bottas basically backed Raikkonen into Hamilton, and by the time Bottas had pitted, Hamilton, Raikkonen was basically a sitting duck for Hamilton there, and with I think it was about 10, 15 laps to go, Hamilton got past. Raikkonen's tyres were destroyed because he had to push so hard on them early to sort of keep that gap. But unfortunately for Ferrari, they just came unstuck again. I mean, it seems to be the case of this championship. It's who makes the least number of mistakes is going to come out on top. And so far through the season, you look at I was going to say Manicourt, then at Paul Ricard, where Sebastian got together with Bottas and cost himself spots there at the end of the race. It's mind you saying that Hamilton had a similar situation at Silverstone, so it's all about damage control and damage limitation. And Mercedes played from a strategy standpoint, played their card perfectly this last weekend. So fair play.
So now, Richard, what's the points gap now between Vettel
I think it's 30 points. It's more than one race.
So it's more than one race now. That Vettel had tightened it up, and now on a weekend where he should have just destroyed Hamilton, all our opportunities lost, and the Italian fans booed Hamilton.
That was silly.
Oh, you should know. You should boo the guy you don't like. I know. Kimi had a thing to say. Kimi said, the fans should not boo the drivers. I don't think that is very good when they boo the drivers. But, hey, you know what? Booing drivers that win a lot it's part of racing. It's been there as long as I can remember. So where are we off to next, Formula One wise?
So they're now, that's the European season finished with. So they're off to Singapore in 2 weeks.
Okay, so
again,
a week off and then to Singapore, and the
so
on again.
You look at that and you say that probably this is the big race for Ferrari. if they can beat Mercedes, and you'd expect the Red Bulls to be up there. You'd expect Red Bull on a circuit like Singapore that is a traction circuit, top speeds are relatively low. You would expect Red Bull to be able to go up there toe-to-toe with Mercedes. So the only downside from Red Bull's perspective is that Ricciardo went through 2 engines in the space of a couple of days at Monza, and depends how they run that. They may go with a new Spec C engine, but that would mean him starting down the grid, or they may go back to the old Spec B engine, which still has some races left on it. They may decide that that's the better tactic for Red Bull going into Singapore. But, I mean, a circuit like Singapore, it's a marginal difference, I think, the Spec B to Spec C.
Yeah. So, I mean, on the offshoot, we've got a week off, so we can discuss more about Singapore next week. But
for sure.
The on-again, off-again saga of Kimi is going to be back with Ferrari. Charles Leclerc is going to be Ferrari. Now it's swung the other way. Now it's back to Kimi's out and Charles is in. So,
I mean, and
it's because we want to honor the wishes of Sergio. So.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I think at that level of auto racing and that level of motorsport, there's no real room for sentiment. I think that the natural progression and changing of the car. I mean, goodness me, Kimi is a fantastic driver. One of the, in terms of pure car control, I think if he'd had a better application of his talent, I think he would have won more championships and more races. I think that I think he's fantastic in so many ways, apart from getting the job done. Unfortunately, it's a horrible thing to say, but he should have.
He's still a world champion. Still a world champion.
For sure.
You know what I mean? He's still. He
threw it away.
He snuck one in. Yeah, but he's got one. Yeah. So.
But
in other real drivers' news that we know to be true, Stoffel Van Dorn is off McLaren. And
Lando Norris is
in.
It was interesting, the comments from Zach Brown about that. It's almost as if they didn't want that move to happen this year. But Zach Brown said, well, look, if we didn't move now, then somebody else would have taken Lando Norris from under our noses, a Toro Rosso or a Haas or somebody like that. And we want to keep him in-house. So our hand's been forced by these other guys. Because there was the rumours of Lando Norris replacing Brendan Hartley at Toro Rosso earlier in the year. So they're almost like, well, we didn't really want to do this, and we're going to do everything we can to help Van Dorn get a drive somewhere else. I think Lando Norris is a huge potential. Is he another Lewis Hamilton? Probably not. But I think the guy has some real potential. So we'll see where that goes. I mean, the other guy that is coming through the ranks and hasn't really talked about as much is the Mercedes young driver, the George Russell, who is going head-to-head with Lando Norris for the Formula 2 title. So there's certainly a good batch of youngsters coming through. It's just the politics of placing those in some of the junior teams.
Yeah. Now, Joey, you want to jump in on this conversation, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, I like silly season stuff, but I guess just kind of briefly to kind of throw on it is, we all know that Lance Stroll's eventually going to end up in a Force India with his dad's situation and Racing Point and all that, which means they probably keep Perez because Perez brings the money in that situation, which kind of leaves Esteban Ocon the odd man out, and you kind of wonder how desperate Mercedes would be to hold on to him. Would they chuck him at Williams and put him through that? And try to help rebuild Williams and that Mercedes program with Paddy Lowe? I don't know. We know Red Bull, Toro Rosso, they usually deal in-house. There's talks of them looking at Jean-Eric Verne and Kvyat to bring back on again instead of looking outside their own walls, which kind of brings me back to this, is if I'm Haas, and if I'm not going to look at any American driver that, honestly, any of the IndyCar Americans that come through here, like Joseph Newgarden and Rossi, certainly at least warrants a phone call. I would probably look at teaming Van Dorn alongside Magnussen because Van Dorn he's not a Hamilton or a Kimi or a Vettel level talent by any stretch, and he's a little older, a little bit more seasoned, but he instantly reminds me a lot of Ricciardo. And I think that if the car is there, when you look at his natural progression and what he's been able to do, he's won on every level. And there's no reason to think that he wouldn't be able to attribute those things. And he's got a good head on his shoulders. He's not a guy that's going to force the issue. He's going to take care of the equipment 9 times out of 10. I think he would be the perfect complement to Magnussen over at Haas.
Sure. Yeah, I think that Haas probably needs a little bit of a shake-up there in their driver lineup. I think Grosjean's been a bit, I don't know, just underwhelming, I think, is probably the fair statement. And he's been a bit unlucky, but also you make your own luck in motorsport, don't you, a lot of the time. But I think, seeing Van Dorn in there, I think keeping him in the series is important, because then you've got to justify these young driver development programs. If you keep swapping and changing them every few minutes, well, what's the point of it? I mean, we've talked about it a long time on the Red Bull situation. It's all well and good being in the Red Bull Young Driver program, but the only benefit of being at Toro Rosso is being in Toro Rosso when a Red Bull drive becomes available. If you're there and there's no Red Bull drive, then like Jaime Alsquari and some of those guys like that, you just get moved to the wayside, and Jorek Verne and guys like that. It's pretty unfair on them, because Verne's a fantastic driver, and he's even said that he's had a couple of Formula One teams talk to him about 2019, following on from his Formula E exploits, and he said that Red Bull isn't one of or Toro Rosso Red Bull isn't one of those teams. So, obviously things have changed quite a bit in the last month or so since he said that, so nobody really knows who that could be. But are you going to start to see this young driver program start to fall apart? Because as Hamilton said, if you've got guys like Esteban Ocon out of a drive, then what's the point of doing it?
Yeah, no, and I think that it speaks volumes on the Van Dorn situation too, because he won the GP2 championship, now called F2, and he could have easily transferred out. I think it was in 16 he ended up winning that thing, and he spent 17, if I recall, or no, I'm sorry, it's 15 he won it. Yeah. And he ended up spending 16 in Super Formula because they didn't have a seat for him. They just didn't have the space to accommodate. So, it's unfortunate, and I agree with you that something's got to be done to help make sure. Unfortunately, there's not enough seats to go around. So, but somebody like Van Dorn certainly warrants the seat. It's just, that's that old adage of, do you have talent or do you have money? Mm-hmm. And essentially you need a little bit of both.
But I think you'll see Ocon in a Williams next year.
Yeah, you won't see him in a McLaren. Nope. So they said that Mercedes box was that one box that did need to be ticked. So, but guys, let's talk about IndyCar. IndyCar was at Portland. IndyCar also announced their schedule, and just really quickly, Circuit of the Americas is going to replace Phoenix on the IndyCar schedule early in the season. And that has drawn a little bit of ire out of Eddie Gossage at Texas Motor Speedway, because he's also not thrilled that Formula One's first draft of the schedule has the U.S. Grand Prix later in the season going head-to-head up against his NASCAR date. So he's not thrilled. He said IndyCar only talked to him about a street race in Austin, but not about going to Dakota, which I don't know what difference it would make. But
massively naive of him if he really believed that. I'm sorry.
Well, exactly. But I think Eddie's starting to he's getting it, realizing that the world doesn't revolve around the Texas Motor Speedway. But that being said, so IndyCar, Portland for the first time put on a pretty darn good show. Sold out. From what I understand, great crowd on hand. Little incident at the start, more than a dust that Scott Dixon gets involved in. Scott Dixon, who's running for a championship, and Joey, you were at the race, so I'll let you take it from there. Scott Dixon is mired in a first lap crash.
Yeah, so everybody, 25 car field, piled down into turn one. Go through two, and you're coming through three, and it looked like Veach, Zach Veach squeezed Hinchcliffe a little bit, and they collide. Veach goes on, but as Hinch gets turned around, Graham Rahal, Ed Jones, hopefully I'm not forgetting anybody, obviously Scott Dixon, and then Marco Andretti, who faced the worst of it. Dixon was kind of in the middle and somehow didn't get much damage other than a few scrapes to the nose of the car.
Eddie kept the car running.
And he kept the car running. Literally, whatever racing god looks over him is got to be like pretty much the best one you could ever hope for, because he went on to end up finishing fifth. So not only did he get in a wreck like that where it wasn't just normal, all these cars are colliding, Marco Andretti gets clipped, goes over the roll hoops of a couple of cars, scrapes the helmet lightly being a figurative word here, of Ed Jones, and then ends up tipping over on his lid. Luckily, nobody got hurt or anything like that. It was a pretty scary incident right out of the gate. And but Dixon would continue on to go finish fifth, and it really was interesting because at the end it looked like it was going to be Alexander Rossi domination day once again for the fourth or fifth time this year. The guy was out front, led 32 laps in this race, but a mistimed caution coming back out. He ends up finishing eighth, so behind Dixon. So if I recall, he trails 29 points going into the final round in Sonoma. So if Dixon finishes anything better than third, he wins. But if he finishes third, there's little circumstances and bonus points where Rossi could take it if Rossi goes out there and does his thing, does Rossi things we've seen this year. The only two other drivers that are actually eligible for the championship are Whoop Power and Newgarden. And, you know, they're going to need some help. Essentially, they're going to need Scott Dixon and Rossi to finish in order, last and next to last.
They're going to need Rossi and Dixon to take one another out in the opening lap.
Exactly.
Yeah. But we've got, like I said, we've got a week off between we go to Sonoma, so we can talk about championship clinching scenarios next week. Yeah. Because we're running out of time here, and I still want to talk about the Spanish guy that drove the Andretti car in Alabama today. But real quick, hats off to race winner Kumasato. The guy has been in the series for 9 years, and this is his third win. He's got one win on a street course, one win on an oval, being Indianapolis, and now one win on a natural terrain road course. So, good on Takuma. Right place, right time. Very patient. Played out the strategy. His strategy worked well for him. Held off a charging Ryan Hunter-Reay at the end of the at the end of the day, and took the win home. So, good job, Takuma.
Yeah, I mean, on a three-stop strategy, no less, he goes out there and wins this race. Hunter-Reay was on a two-stop strategy and ends up being the guy that has to chase, which is kind of weird. But I think the two most impressive runs, outside of the obvious being Dixon of the day, Sebastian Bourdais walled it in final practice, essentially had a Frankenstein-type car, as he called it, in qualifying, mashed together from all three of the crews, goes out there and lays down a lap to get in the fast six. I think he qualified fourth, if I remember right, and goes out there and gets the final step of the podium. Probably the oldest podium that we've seen in IndyCar, in a long, long time. I mean,
yeah. Because Sato's 40, right? Hunter-Reay's 37.
Yep.
And then
Bourdais
is 39 or 40, yeah, so yeah. Good job for the old guys.
Yeah, and then Spencer Pigot, shout out to this guy. He gets the first full season nod. We've seen some good runs out of him, and he quietly worked himself into a fourth place finish. So really incredibly impressed with his pace this year. But collectively, like you said, Sato, hats off to him, because he did have the strategy at Gateway to probably fuel mileage and everything to be the guy to win if the caution fell the right way in Gateway. And they somehow turned it into a situation where a week later, here we are, three-stop strategy getting the win.
Bam. So, that being said, the Monster Road to Indy wrapped up their season, crowned their champions. Last year we had Mazda in there. It looks like Pat Ward and Colton Herta both going to make their IndyCar debut in Sonoma with Harding Racing. So, what's the long-term projection looking like for the Mazda Road to Indy? Joey, you wrote a great article that's in IndyCar.com covering the banquet and the thanks to Mazda. But we got a few minutes left. But let's talk about this ladder series and what we might expect in the uncertain future of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the future is going to be fine for them. I mean, I think Dan Anderson, CEO of Anderson Promotions, which runs the Mazda Road to Indy and essentially operates the first two, I think they're going to be fine. I think that when we look at the grand scheme of things, the car counts are starting to come back up in Indy Lights with the recent announcement of BN Racing today, and some other ones in the future coming. And I think what's awesome about this situation, even though it's also something that brings a lot of people to tears, Mazda banged out over $12 million in scholarship money and influenced over 250 drivers throughout the ladder system. And, they made up 25 drivers in a 33-car field in the Indy 500 this past year. So the influence of Mazda couldn't be overstated enough with what they've been able to do. And I love the fact that even though they're pulling out of this situation with the Mazda Road to Indy and just becoming the Road to Indy, that Mazda is going to continue their commitment for at least next season, where the winners from this year are going to run sole red colors. They committed the scholarships for the rest of this season that'll transfer over to next year. So those are encouraging things. I think the Road to Indy, especially Indy Lights, with this 5-year agreement with IndyCar to help stabilize a few things and to bring together that marriage together, I think it's going to work out great. And I'm interested to see how everything continues to go, because now we're starting to see a little bit more connection between the Road to Indy and IndyCar. I mean, these IndyCar guys are taking notice. I mean, Hinchcliffe knows exactly who Oliver Askew is. So, that kind of attention is great for the series. It's great for the development of the series, and that's the reason why they have world talents at the youth level that are clamoring to get in IndyCar.
Yeah, we've got all these great talents, but at the same time that the Road to Indy is searching for a sponsor, so is the IndyCar series. So hopefully somebody will step on board there. Every time I talk to what's his name? Guy who runs the series. He's pretty optimistic that he's got something in line there. So hopefully we'll get all this sponsorship stuff worked out and keep the series going. But just got a few minutes left. But there was Fernando Alonso in a Andretti IndyCar at Barber today. It was popped up on Twitter. He's running the green and blue Munoz car from Indy. He said he really enjoyed it, but at the same time he's saying this test has no impact on his future decision. So, Joey, what are you hearing? I mean, is Alonso in a fifth Andretti car done deal, or are we just still playing games?
The fifth Andretti car is interesting. I mean, certainly with some other things, the moving parts available there with that we've heard in the future and rumblings about Colton Herta and Pato O'Ward, this could certainly open up that possibility. But I think that, in the grand scheme of things, I think it did impact him. I think it's important that he leaves this with a smile on his face. He enjoys road racing in particular, at places like Road America, at places like Barber. We're going to Laguna Seca. We're going to COTA, which is, the Road America of the South, as I'm going to call it. It has everything you could want in a racetrack, more or less, and he's run there before. So I think that he is ultimately going to be making a decision soon on his full-time progress with this. However, I wouldn't expect an announcement until probably the U.S. Grand Prix. So, what is that, mid to late October? I think it kind of aligns when Andretti or whomever else is going to kind of be partnering with him can make the formal announcement while he's still here in the States doing things, and they can do it on a big stage, an F1 stage. So that's kind of my anticipation. But Alonso does Alonso things, and he's a little unique when it comes to that. But props to him for being able to do something with an IndyCar road course. Barber's a fantastic facility, great track, and it's beautiful. Mr. Barber does a great job with that facility, and if there was one track that you could pick to go run to that's as scenic as that one, that's so scenic, it's certainly that one.
Yeah, and the word on the street, if you believe here, is that his times in the dry session were just a few tenths shy of Joseph Newgarden's pole time. So, which if that's true, that's quite encouraging. But you wouldn't expect.
Would you expect anything else?
No. No, but in a short time to get the car up to speed that you're unfamiliar with, yeah, it's actually quite impressive whether he's Alonso or not. So
I remember old, was it Senna's test out at Firebird or wherever it was in the 80s or 90s?
1992.
Was it? Yeah.
Yeah, that's Senna. So, all right, guys, we are just about out of time. So I'm going to give you all one final thought that you have to give me in 2 seconds. 2-second final thought.
I don't have one.
Okay. Richard.
Don't have one.
All right. Seth?
None here.
Man, you guys are awful.
Actually, I got a final thought.
Oh, too late. It's Gray's turn.
Well, fine then.
Looking forward to Indy and seeing what that'll bring and getting us ready for the playoffs.
All right, Joey.
Gray is the only person looking forward to that race. So I think that I'm excited about COTA being on the IndyCar calendar. I'm excited about Laguna Seca. We touch our roots while we also look to the future. And I think COTA putting two markets in Texas makes a lot of sense. I know Eddie's maybe not happy too much about it, but I also think that this is encouraging because this is going to make, now that there's a 4-year agreement with TMS, this is going to make Eddie kind of step up his game to what he already has been doing. And he's already been doing a good job with everything, but I think this is going to really push the limits to see who can do what for IndyCar. And I think we're going to get the best out of both worlds from COTA and from TMS. So exciting times, and I'm excited to get down there in March.
Oh, yeah, you're going to have a blast. I might join you there in March. So,
anyway. I do one very, very quick thing. If anybody's interested, check out a website called aurouge.engineering. It's a little side project of mine.
Okay, we'll do that. Yeah, aurouge.engineering.
Correct.
All right.
How do you spell that?
EAUROUGE.engineering.
Just for those that are illiterate.
Do you want engineering as well, or are you good with that?
I think I can figure that one out. I can Google that one.
I want to thank you, Joey, Richard, Seth, and Gray, for coming on the show tonight. I want to thank the Hoobazoo Radio Network, and I want to thank iHeartRadio for hosting us. And I want to thank all you folks that tune in and listen to our nonsense week in and week out. And we'll talk to you in a week. Until then, enjoy the races. Good night.
WHOOBAZOO, that's Hoobazoo.com. Enter website, enter website, enter website, enter website.